Hello, everybody. Andy Goldberg here. Welcome back to the Founders Chair podcast. Really pleased to have on the show today Ryan Grant, who's the owner of Caledonian Cask Partnership. Ryan, welcome to the Founders Chair.
Thanks for having me.
Really excited to talk to you today. Um, Before we hear the story of your business journey, your entrepreneurial journey, we'd love to just hear a little bit about you personally, Ryan, a little bit about your very colorful background and where you're from, what you get up to when you're not at work.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Originally from a little town called Glenrothes in Fife, so East Coast. Lived there until I was about 10, and then was very fortunate that my dad picked up a plant engineering job out in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, so I moved out there when I was 10, and then I spent my kind of my entire senior schooling years out there, so 10 to 18, and then yeah, moved back to Scotland to join the army. Joined the army for 4 years, but during that time found out that I was a half decent rugby player, I guess. Um, and then yeah, played rugby for the army. That quickly snowballed into Scotland under 21s, and then then I spent the next kind of 13 years playing professional rugby, and then yeah, retired age 33, which yeah, 6 years ago now, seems like a lifetime. And then yeah, moved into the alcohol space with a couple of my own little companies.
Was retirement from rugby difficult? Because you see athletes like tear up on the press conferences and things when they've just played their last match or whatever, and
Yeah.
they're going to do with themselves. Or were you quite excited to get on with the next stage of your life?
Yeah, I guess it was a double-edged sword, right? Like, you spend 13 years doing something that you love and you're passionate about, but your body starts to tell you time's up. So your head wants to keep going and you want to keep playing, but there becomes a time where I guess you're no longer able to compete at that level. And for me, I was lucky enough that my last year at Glasgow Warriors, I failed the medical the year before, had a prolapse disc in my back, and both parties, myself and the Warriors, kind of knew that this would be my last year. So I had a kind of year to get my head round retirement. So from that point of view, it was easy. It was still emotional, when you put the jersey on for the very last time. You say, cheerio for the very last time to the boys, and you still see them again, but yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow. And then, the hardest part comes thereafter that when, you're 33 years old, you're unemployed, and you've got the same skill set as a high school graduate in most employers' eyes, because there's no paper trail. There's just you know, YouTube
And
highlights.
did you have a post rugby plan? Had you thought about going into business or getting into whiskey at that stage, or was it just I'm going to be playing rugby forever?
No, like you kind of know about it, and the SRU started doing a good job while I was playing of making players aware of retirement because we don't get paid like footballers do, or maybe a little bit better now, but certainly back then we didn't. And I did a degree in environmental science, a kind of distance learning degree with the Open University, with the view that I would move into that sector once I retired from rugby. And both my dad and my brother are kind of engineering backgrounds, and they were saying to me, "Listen, this is a good track to go down with the way things are going. So try this environmental science route." So that's what I did, and through I guess sponsors of the club, Scottish Power, Scottish Energy Networks, they were all very good to me when I was retiring. They gave me ample work experience, but I just kind of had this overwhelming feeling that it wasn't for me. I'd spent 4 years in the army and 13 years playing rugby, and a lot of the jobs on offer to me were, you know, corporate jobs based around a computer and a spreadsheet, essentially, and not really outdoorsy at all. Um, so it never really panned out for me that way.
So tell us the story now about how the business came about and what made you decide to go into business and what gave you the confidence to go into business for yourself.
Probably naivety, I think. um, yeah, so from that environmental science conversation, there was a company called Eden Mill I don't know if you've heard of them. They were a kind of big gin company back then. Now into whiskey, but the owner was a chap called Paul Miller, and he we had a conversation, and he said to me, "Listen, if you can come up to the distillery and find a job there that would green the place up, if there's opportunities for you to improve our business, I'd be open to giving you the job." But there was no official job, if you like. Uh, and then when I went up to meet Paul, he wasn't there. We'd gotten our wires crossed for whatever reason, and I ended up spending the day with the distilling team, and they showed me how to make gin. There's a guy called Mark Watson, and another chap called Jasper. So yeah, I'm up at the distillery fully suited, and these guys in overalls are showing me how to make gin. gin. But I loved it, and I said to my wife and my best friend that I think that we could make a gin brand. I'm confident that we could build our own recipe from what I've learned, and then a bit of consulting back and forth with the guys at Eden Mill with Mark Watson because he was a master of his craft and was willing to lend us a bit of expertise. We created a company called the Garden Shed Gin Company, drinks company even, and that was kind of my first step into the drinks industry. And I kind of faced with a decision whether to give up everything I know in that the Scottish Rugby offered me a coaching role, or I take a leap into a completely unknown alcohol kind of based company and try and figure out what a P&L is and how you do a VAT return and applying for AWRS and everything else that now seems completely normal to me, but at the time was a million miles from what I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I obviously made the decision to give the gin company a crack, feeling like I could always go back to rugby. And yeah, that was the kind of beginning of my foray into the alcohol industry.
Yeah, so the decision was to go straight into something you know and you're comfortable with, or into something that you naively think you can do, but you don't know anything about yet, the business end
100%.
and all that. But you had a fallback. You had a fallback option, I guess, to a certain.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the Caledonian Cask partnership. Then, what do you guys do? What do you make now?
So we're essentially a whiskey brokerage, and then we've got a kind of small shareholding in some other companies at an independent bottler called Unkiltered, which I think that's it there behind me. Um, so yeah, we buy whiskey probably exclusively from trade groups, William Grant's, Edrington, things like that, and then yeah, we kind of act as a kind of middleman, if you like, between them and the export market and independent bottlers, and the occasional kind of high net worth client that's looking for a crazy cask to bottle for his daughter's wedding, or um, that's pretty much yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And then we help other companies out that want to do, single cask releases for special occasions, and um, even bands. Some bands have brought bottlings out that we've been involved in, and yeah, so that's kind of it now. So we get a small hand in all these kind of little cool projects, and yeah, we don't have to deal with selling the physical bottles, which is really nice.
So tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. What would you say has been your biggest learning so far?
I think COVID was tough. Like I said, we had the gin company, Garden Shed, and we were building that nicely, and we had a pretty good export market and a good domestic presence. But then that just got wiped out overnight, um, and that was the start of Caledonian Cask Company. I kind of put all my savings into the gin company, and it wasn't going well, and no matter what we did, we couldn't pull it back because the country was in lockdown. And although people were buying alcohol, it just it wasn't in comparison to what we were doing before. So uh, yeah, the toughest time was definitely that making the decision. I think I was down to about my last £2,000 at one point, with a mortgage to pay and kids to feed and what have you. And I had to make a pretty drastic move, away from the gin business into whiskey. And yeah, having been through that entire thing with the gin company, and then stepping into again another world where there are similarities, but still very different from selling bottles of gin to a bartender, selling bulk whiskey to a client in Hong Kong, if you like. Um, so yeah, it's definitely that's been the hardest part, and I'd say it's been an uphill slog for the last 6 years, and every day's a school day. But definitely, COVID was the biggest kick in the teeth, I think.
So, COVID aside, just in general, as a business owner, what would you say, what would you find is your biggest challenge?
Uh, Sometimes I really struggle with the pace of things. In sport, when you play sport, you play on a Saturday, you make a mistake, something doesn't go well, something does go well, you assess it pretty quickly, and then by Monday, Tuesday, the problem's solved. I really struggle with probably not so much as much anymore, but in the beginning, I really struggled with the the slow nature of corporate business, if you like. The I'll need to ask so and so, he'll need to ask so and so, or just an email that goes unanswered, or just the general pace of normal life, if you like, versus the sporting life. I used to get very frustrated with, um, but I've since learned to relax a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, definitely a challenge for me in the beginning, and to not act on that frustration as well. I guess show my naivety again, um, by peppering a client with emails, being like, "Well, you said you would do this, and you haven't done it yet. Why haven't you done it? That's not how, that's not the life I'm used to," type thing. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So where there's business, there's people. You got
yeah,
customers, suppliers, team members, and people go at a different pace. Everybody
yeah,
goes at their
absolutely.
own pace, and that's got to be exasperating sometimes.
Yeah, and I think when you're an entrepreneur, like yourself, and when you're trying to start a business, it's the most important thing in the world to you, but it's not it's not anyone else's most important thing. So, Susan down at the distillery, she's got bigger fish to fry than your potential small piece of business. But to me, it was a be all and end all, and yeah, I guess just getting your head around that fact that you're not everyone's priority when again from the sporting background, you are everyone's priority. The physios and the doctors and the team manager and everyone is there to help you. Um, and then you come here and you're like, well, if you don't help yourself, then no one else will.
Yeah, everybody's thinking about somebody's. Everybody's thinking about themselves. Nobody's thinking about you and your email and your
Yeah,
priority.
exactly that. And the more you send, the more they're like, well, you can wait until next week. Um,
Yeah, I
so yeah.
understand. Yeah. So who has helped you and supported you and pushed you in your business journey? Obviously, you mentioned, Paul kind of early on having those conversations. Do you, it can be lonely, and I know you've got, other like partners in the business and things. Like who do you rely on and lean on to make sure you stay positive and motivated and you don't act on those
Yeah.
negative energies?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because it is, like you say, it can be quite lonely. Like this is my office that I'm in just now, and for the most part, I am on my own. I have a business partner, Max McFarlane, who's a whiskey maker. So we get together and bounce ideas off him. But I'm lucky, I think, now that I've got a couple of people, senior people in the whiskey industry that would probably more be friends than mentors that I can lean on. There's chap Andy Calder at Local Women Group has been a great help to me, and you know, I guess people in the whiskey industry, Brendan McCarran. And I was lucky enough in the very beginning of the business to spend quite a bit of time with Gareth McCall from Clyde Blowers. We kind of partnered together on a few projects, and he's just a laser focused kind of guy when it comes to business. I don't like, nothing else is. So it was great to have, yeah, those people, but probably my wife takes the brunt of it. She takes the frustration, and she's always the level head that's like, we'll just, give it a day, or um, but yeah, it is difficult, and especially when you're learning all these things. I should also mention, sorry, that my sports agent from rugby, it's a company called Red Sky Management, and it's run by Rona and Rowan Shepherd. And Rona's a business coach, but Sheps Rowan was my agent, and I'm not sure there's another agency that does what they do in terms of helping with that transition. So throughout all of my, naivety, poor decision making, deciding to jump into a gin business as opposed to sticking with something that I know inside out. Yeah, they were super supportive and definitely a good shoulder to lean on when,
Mm.
things weren't going great.
Okay, excellent. A couple good shout outs there then. What's the
Yeah.
next big thing for you in your business, Ryan? What do the next couple years look like in terms of opportunity and growth and challenge?
Yeah, the whiskey market's in a funny place at the moment. It's it's like everything is suffering. So a large part of the business for me just now is trying to build an inventory whilst prices are rock bottom. And we've recently taken on a warehouse up in Perth, so we're kind of moving into not just providing whiskey, but we want to provide the whole service, from cask storage to potentially bottling, maturation, then potentially even fulfillment. So yeah, we just signed a lease on a warehouse up in Perth, and that'll be the focus for the next kind of year or so to make sure that gets up to speed. And um, yeah, hopefully after that I can disappear off to the Bahamas or something, and someone else can work it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And you just check in on the numbers.
yeah, hopefully it's never going to happen, though, is it? um,
Um, okay. So what advice would you give to business owners or would-be business owners who are just thinking about going out on their own or who are just starting out?
do you know, like, it's not profound advice at all, but I think the one thing I've learned from Garden Shed into Caledonian Cask, Unkiltered, Cask Works, a new warehouse, is that you just have to go for it. So many people talk to me about this, like, good business ideas that they have. Um, and my advice is just always go for it. If you want it enough, you'll get it. There's no substitute for hard work, in my opinion. I think if you want a business in it and you want it to be successful, you have to be willing to put in the time. And if you put in the time, you'll get there. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to know, because there's been so many times throughout the last 6 years where I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I knew nothing about accounting, knew nothing about setting up businesses. But if you're willing to put in the time, you can find out, and you can make it work. So yeah, I guess my main piece of advice would be, first of all, make sure you're willing to put in the time, and if you are, then absolutely go for it, because it'll work if you're prepared
Yeah,
to
but
make it.
if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
Yeah, it's not easy, and don't get me wrong. Like I said, there's been times where I've been sitting on my case staircase, sobbing my heart out, thinking that I've completely ruined it. I'm going to have to sell the house. And like I said, I was down to my last £2,000 at one point, which is nothing when you've got a mortgage to pay and a business to run. And so there are ups and downs, but you just have to, yeah, you just have to stay the course a lot of the time. And I think it is important to have a good network of people to lean on, um, and that will come over time. When for me certainly anyway, when people see what I'm doing, and being transparent with them about potentially not having a clue sometimes. I think that's quite refreshing for people to hear, as opposed to someone who thinks they know it all. So yeah, I think
Were
there's
there
definitely
any did you take any skills or disciplines from your sports career that you were able to apply to business? Like, you're talking about sticking with it and putting in the time and the discipline. Did you feel that having a career in sports helped you with a career in business?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, 100%. Like I said, the feedback loop in sport is super fast. And that goes right the way back to anything. If I need to run 100 meters faster, or I need to bench press more, or I need to make more tackles in a game. Those are all really tangible things that you can work on, and the only way to actually get to that spot is to put the work in. You're never going to get a better bench press by hoping that someone else is going to do it for you. Um, you're never going to run faster without putting in the speed drills and the time. You're never going to be a better scrummager without. So sport really, really lays it out in the simplest form, that if you want something, because it's physical, you're accountable. You have to go and do that yourself. And I think taking that mindset into business where I'm not relying on anyone, I'm not looking for handouts, I'm willing to do as much as I can by myself. It's certainly in the early days, then that makes a huge difference. And I don't think like you say, there's ups and downs. I don't think I would have gotten the business to where it is without adopting that kind of mindset when there's obstacles in the way. You know, how do you get through them? Well, you just kind of have to. So figure it out.
Yeah.
And the internet's a wonderful thing for learning a lot of stuff at that. So
There's no excuse for not knowing the answer.
yeah, 100%.
You can just Google it. It's implementation, it's acting on it that's going to make the difference, though.
Yeah. And the first step's the hardest and all the other cliched stuff, but it really is like, once yeah, that's what I was chatting to a friend the other day about who was looking to start up a business. And I said to her, listen, just register the business on Companies House. Like, that's the first step. Just do that. Once you've done that, the rest of it might just be a little bit easier. But you just have to, whether they're baby steps or big steps, you just kind of have to keep moving forward. Um, and yeah, I'm sure hopefully my wife and friends would say the same about me. I'm a firm believer in we just have to keep moving forward.
Well, that's a great line to end on then, I think, because we've come up to the end of our time. But Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for being on the founder's chair.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It's been a good chat.
And thanks to all our listeners, as always, for tuning in. Keep an eye out for more episodes on YouTube and Spotify and on LinkedIn. But for the time being, it's just to say thanks again to Ryan Grant from Caledonia Cask Partnership. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.